Welcome to the Diplomacy Show, where we look at the context behind the text, the meaning behind special events and gestures, the historical and geopolitical compulsions behind foreign policy choices and decisions. Our focus today is on Argentina. At one level, a country on the other side of the world with India, at the southern edge of Latin America, bordering on an Antarctica. And yet India had opened a trade mission there in 1943 before it became independent. It established an embassy in 1949, and this year the two countries celebrated 70 years of establishment of diplomatic relations. The economic relationship with Argentina has focused on agriculture. More than 80% of Argentina's $2.5 billion exports to India are made up of edible oils. But there's now work in the IT sector, and there's potential in oil and gas and in lithium batteries as India moves towards electric vehicles. Like other countries in Latin America, Argentina has also struggled between center-left and center-right policies, trying to define its options related to the so-called Washington Consensus and the struggle between privatization, neoliberal reforms, and social welfare measures on the other. To understand these challenges, to understand the relationship with India, our special guest today is the Ambassador of Argentina to India, Ambassador Daniel Chuburu. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Singh. It's a big pleasure for me to be in your show, and I thank the possibility of talking about my favorite issue, Argentina.
Well, thank you. And as I mentioned in my earlier comments, Argentina virtually at the other end of the world from India. And not many people in India are aware of Argentina, its dynamics, its complexities, its strengths. So could you explain to us, from your perspective, how do you look at Argentina? What does it mean to you, including in the context of the region and the wider global community?
Well, thank you so much. Let me start by saying that you define it very well. We are on the other edge of the world, and to give you an idea, Argentina is almost the size of India as a country, with 5,000 kilometers long.
And not many people realize that, because it's a very narrow stretch along the Latin American continent.
That's correct. And out of that, the main difference comes at the time you talk about inhabitants. While you are on 1.4 billion people, we are in 45 million people. So that gives us a huge territory with a very scarce population. And basically the other thing that you already mentioned, it's our agriculture orientation. And that comes from the fact that 53% of our land is good for agriculture. So we have that, and we have developed a very good agriculture in those terms, and we are producing nowadays for food for more than 10 times the population that we have. So that's one of the main strengths of Argentina nowadays. The other issue that you referred, and I think it's a very interesting one, is how Argentina has acted in the region. And in this regard, we have had for a long time a very good position within the region in terms of guiding the region somehow in the political and in the economic terms. And of course, we have a very good relationship nowadays with our neighbors. That relationship has been coming and going. But since the last 30 to 40 years, we have been able to solve every single problem that we have with the neighbors.
And what kind of problems did you have with the neighbors?
Well, of course, there were border problems coming from the time in which the countries declared independence, in which some areas were not very well defined. Imagine that we have with Chile 5,000 kilometers of border, all in the mountains. So till you get to divide that and establish exactly the limits and where it goes, it has taken a long time. Or problems of borders in the north with Bolivia, because we have some rivers that comes and goes.
Recently, you've had elections in Argentina, and a new president and vice president have been elected. And the new president, Alberto Fernández, the vice president, Cristina Fernández, and she was the president 5 years earlier. And at that time, the present president, Mauricio Macri, when he was elected, he was seen as being a major reformer. He would set right the economic challenges that Argentina was facing, because at that time, Argentina was seen as facing major financial challenges. In fact, some companies had moved courts in the US to seize Argentina's assets, including some ships. So what is it that has enabled within 5 years for the people to want to go back to the kind of leadership and policies that were there till 2015?
I think that you were very right saying that Macri was seen as a very important reformer. The main problem I think that the government faced in these last 4 years is that the period is too short to do such kind of reforms. So the expectations of the people were that a big change has to be produced in a very short time, and that's not possible. I think that the whole region has been going through this same problem of the difference of expectations of the people and what the governments are capable of providing under those demands. And you have seen that in the times of Lula in Brazil, in which all the many people that he brought up from lower classes to the middle class have been increasing their demands. And from the government, you don't have the possibility of bringing all those changes at the same pace as the demands and the expectations increase. So that's something that finally brings you to people asking more than you can give and them not being happy with you are providing them. So I think that the government tried to do a lot of huge reforms in the country, and those huge reforms need a lot of time. 4 years were not enough, and they were not even they were not able to prove that those reforms were the ones that satisfy the needs of the people.
When people talk about Argentina, think about Argentina, one of the defining parameters seems to be for some time this phenomenon of Peronism. And Peron was the leader for a long time. Then you have the Peronist parties, and very often people have defined the policies as being Peronist and anti-Peronist. So what does Peronism mean for Argentina? What is the message, and why has that become a kind of defining parameter in Argentinian society?
Well, for some part of the population, Peronism has become a religion, and that's how a lot of people feel on the following Peronism, the Peronism doctrine. Of course, Peronism has been one of the major parties in Argentina. It's a movement, not a party as they define it, and that has tinted the political scenario of Argentina since mid of past century. So we have 70 years in which the whole political scenario of Argentina has been dominated by Peronism and anti-Peronism, or Peronism and non-Peronism. There is a say that once they asked Peron about the political situation in the country, and he said, well, the communists are doing this, the radicals are doing this, these are doing this, and the Peronists, no, all of them are Peronists.
I see.
So
from your perspective, what is the message that Peronism brings in Argentina?
Well, the main message that Peronism brought to Argentina was the message of social equality. And this has been social justice, and this has been the main core. There are some other parties, particularly others from the right, left, or the left, that included the same aspects in their programs. So they don't believe that Peronism has been the only one that has fought for that social justice and for that social equity. But in fact, that has been the flag of Peronism, and they've been doing, and as a movement, as they define themselves, they have the advantage of having a left wing, a right wing, a center wing. So it doesn't matter where the balance is going, anyhow, the principles are still behind that.
If we are to look at the foreign policy priorities for Argentina, going beyond your neighborhood, how would you describe that?
Well, you know, for us, the basic principles of our international policy has been, first of all, the neighborhood. And in this regard, even if you watch at the center-right or center-left governments in Argentina, although those changes, I think that the main focus of Argentina has been the region. Secondly, if you take into account commercial relationships, we have had a triangular relation with traditionally with Europe and the US, in which we were importing much more from the US and exporting much more to Europe. So that kind of balance helped us to balance the relationship always also with the two superpowers. Of course, that nowadays there are all the new emerging markets that are being also of particular interest for our region. And here it comes the relationship with India and China, of course, because they are the new focus that we have in this region. And between both, you can add 3 billion people. So these two are markets that nowadays you cannot ignore.
Before I come to the relationship with India, in terms of the relationship with China, and China now has a growing footprint, economic trade footprint across the world for many countries in Africa and also even in Latin America, it is emerging as the largest trading partner. There is also the Belt and Road Initiative. So how has Argentina engaged with China's growing global profile?
Look, we have a good relationship with China, and we have a very good commercial relationship with China. And China has been working a lot in the whole region. You know that China is demanding a lot of natural resources to fulfill their development program. And the region is a region that can provide a lot of that natural resources. We maybe don't have the presence of China that much established in Argentina, although even if you go to Buenos Aires, you have the Chinese neighborhood. So that's not a fact. But we have been working with them in a balance also with some other relations that we have.
Talking about the India relationship, your president visited India in February this year. The Indian Prime Minister was in Argentina in November last year, where he had gone for the G20 meeting. And I noticed that during that visit in November, your president did a very special gesture of inviting our Prime Minister for a bilateral meeting over breakfast at his residence, which in some ways was unusual because it was a multilateral meeting happening. And how do you explain that?
Well, I think that President Macri and Prime Minister Modi they met 5 times, and I believe that there has developed a very good approach among them. So at the time Prime Minister Modi was coming to Argentina, and at the level of the relationship that we have had with India for so many years, because you mentioned 70 years of opening of the embassies, of diplomatic relations. But the first consulate that we had in India was established in the 20s in Kolkata. So
in 1920.
In 1920. So relations between the two countries are much longer than just the establishment of diplomatic relations with India as an independent country. So I believe that there is a good understanding, a good entente between them. So that was why Argentina wanted to have this bilateral opportunity with India. and due that there was not possibilities of having a formal meeting because the days that that visit required added to the G20 summit.
Victoria Ocampo, who had hosted Rabindranath Tagore in Argentina, had also visited India. And at some stage, she had also spoken up for the independence movement in Bangladesh. What has been the impact of that on the people-to-people contact between the two countries?
Look, I think that interaction has given a lot of Argentinians the passion they have for India. If you go back to the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Argentina in November, when he arrived, he was received by a 10,000 people yoga class. We have more than 500 yoga centers in Argentina and a lot of devotion of all the Indian spirituality. And I believe that a big part of that comes from the time of that relationship between Victoria Ocampo and Mr. Tagore. I believe that has gone into the people, and as she was attracted by the spirituality that came with Tagore, a lot of people felt that the spirituality in this country is very attractive. There was a big relationship with that area of the country, and Kolkata was the center of a lot of activity during the British Empire. So that was one of, but that also helped link this visit of Tagore to Argentina.
In February, when your president visited India, he came here in middle of February, and it was just around that time that the terrorist attack had taken place in India in Pulwama, which had affected the mood, the political, popular level in a certain way. How did that impact on the visit of your president in terms of discussions, in terms of the outcomes of that visit?
Well, that impacted in the sense that there was a lot of sensibility in India concerning the issue of terrorism. So everything was a little bit terrorism centered at the time. We were able to discuss and produce a special declaration, bilateral declaration between the two countries on the position on terrorism itself. And I think that was a good understanding in the issue of how all of us have to contribute and cooperate for the elimination of terrorism at the global level.
Edible oil imports from Argentina to India form a very important part of agricultural cooperation between the two countries. But is there a plan to do more than just import of agriculture produce? Are you looking at other areas of cooperation? And also at some stage there were talk of pulses being produced in Argentina for the Indian market. Seeds were taken from here. Has that progressed in any way?
Well, there is a lot of areas of cooperation between the two countries that we can develop. And in this sense, we are trying to work. We signed in the visit of the president an MOU on cooperation in the field of agriculture that establishes a plan of a work plan for the area.
And that work plan is on technology collaboration, on increasing productivity.
It covers all the area of agriculture. You mentioned productivity. We are willing to cooperate with India. I told you we produce 10 times the food that we need, and that means a high productivity on what we have. So we are willing to cooperate with India and work together on how those technologies, those new technologies, not only in the field of equipment, but also in the field of biotechnology and production technologies and all that, can enhance the productivity in India. Because you are a very high growing country, and demands are going to be growing up also, and those demands will at a certain point in time meet the barrier of the expansion of the production.
Argentina borders on the Antarctic, and India has also done a lot of research on the Antarctic continent and has some facilities and bases there. So is there potential for cooperation between the two countries in this area?
Yeah, well, during the visit of President Macri, we were able to sign an MOU on Antarctic cooperation. So it's an area, of course, in which mainly what's going on is that kind of a scientific cooperation, so as we can all of us learn of what is going on there.
Have you taken some measures also to promote more tourists from India to Argentina?
You know that Indian tourists are tourists that are very exquisite in their visit. So a lot of them that have been able to go all around the world are always looking for new scenarios where to go, and Antarctica has become one of them. So you have a very important company from Mumbai that they are dealing with these tourists, and they are taking at least 200 tourists in 2 cruises to Antarctica during this month of December. These added to the tourists that usually go to Antarctica during the year. So we are very pleased with that kind of tourism that's coming from India.
Although India has not made a mark at the international level in football, yet there is a lot of passion in this country related to that sport. And of course, the name of Argentina is associated with football in a big way. Your players, Maradona, Lionel Messi, are treated with a lot of respect and admiration in India. So when you go around the country, do people talk to you about football, about the Argentina team and your major players?
Well, you know, the main card of presentation that we have is Maradona or Messi. That's for sure. And in certain areas of the country, particularly in the east and south, there is a great number of fans of football, and in all those areas we are trying to see how we can cooperate to help develop football in India. I think that India has a big potential in every sport, and due to the population and due to the people loving sports. So I think that with a little cooperation there from some countries, not only Argentina, but some other countries, you will
And are some of your players playing in the some of the football leagues in India?
Yeah, we have a couple of players now playing in the league, in the first league, in the Premier League. So we think that this is the beginning of, I hope this will be the beginning of a greater cooperation in terms of not only of players, but also in terms of coaching and development of sport techniques.
So if you were to just focus on the people-to-people dimension of the relationship, so based on your experience now in this country, what do you think can be done to enhance that?
Well, what we are trying to do is trying to expand our presence in the cultural field. So we have been, one area that for us is very important in the cultural area is the area of filming, of films and film production. We, as Argentina, are producing a lot of films, and not at the magnitude of Bollywood and all the other industries in India, but we think that that can help us. So we are participating in a lot of film festivals in India. We are also working a lot in the diffusion of tango, which is our national dance. We are having a lot of milongas for people dancing tango here in Delhi and all over India. I had the opportunity of being to Bangalore a few months ago, in which they had people from Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, and all over India dancing tango. So for me, that was something fantastic, you know, finding that, because that's a very good instrument of the people-to-people relationship.
Well, Daniel, I wanted to thank you for spending time with us and really sharing very deeply your perspectives on how do you define Argentina, its relations with neighborhood, foreign policy priorities, and of course, the various aspects of the relationship with India. So thank you for joining the show.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Singh.